were the pilot. You were the responsible for that helicopter.
Yes.
You were responsible for getting those troops in there.
Exactly. As the aircraft commander, I was responsible for the aircraft itself, for its maintenance and condition. I'm responsible for the crew members. We called the co-pilots Peter pilots. That was the term, the guys that were training. Because when you first get to country, if they just turned you loose, you'd end up killing yourself in no time. So they had to have a senior, usually a senior warrant officer, would train you for all of the combat operations.
And how many on the crew on the aircraft?
Four on the crew. Pilot, co-pilot, a door gunner, and a crew chief. Crew chief totally responsible for the maintenance of that aircraft. Picking up wounded, bringing out food and water.
So how long were you, if you were flying these troops in, I could see them jumping out then, when everybody's on the ground, you guys would take off. But if you had to pick up wounded, you're on the ground a little bit longer.
Not too much longer. But
really?
But after we drop them off, we would go back to somewhere near a base or something, along a road or something, and sit down and wait. And the way it worked in Vietnam is that they had what they called combat sweeps. So they suspected that the enemy was here. So that we drop them, they would sweep. If they didn't find the enemy, they would go to another landing zone. They'd call us, we'd go back and pick them up. And they'd say, well, maybe they're over there instead. We'd pick them up and take them over and drop them over here. And there were days when I would do like 5 or 6 LZs, landing zones, in one day. They preferred for us to actually, at some point in time during the day, to actually get shot at. Because if we got shot at, they knew that we had found what we were looking for, generally.
How many times were you shot at? How many missions? How many combat missions did you fly?
I flew more than 830 combat missions.
830 combat missions,
Yeah.
and out of that,
I have 33 air medals, one for every 25 combat missions.
And how many, out of that, what percentage were you shot at?
Probably 30 to 40%. I was 19, 20 years old.
And you're going to live forever.
And people look at things differently when they're 19 and 20 years old. So I never suspected that I would have any problems. But what happened is that after about 7 months of doing that, my commanding officer, he wanted me to train to become what they call flight lead. So some guys got to be out of front of that formation and leading them and to do all this stuff. And that person has to really know what the heck they're doing, because if he makes a mistake, everybody in that line is in real bad danger. And to do that, he wanted me to fly with the gunships to learn how they operated. Because, I'd gone into all these LZs with the gunships functioning. I saw them working, but it's a lot different than actually being with them all day and see what they're doing. I started flying with them as a training.
So the gunship helicopter, again, it's a Huey.
It's a Huey.
But different modifications to it.
Yeah,
than the
so
transport helicopter.
it's a smaller helicopter with more powerful engines. And we had 2 rocket pods, 7 rockets each, folding fin aerial rockets, they called them, and 2 General Electric Gatling guns, 1,500 rounds per minute. So if we selected it that way, we could fire 3,000 rounds in 1 minute. You could take a football field and put a bullet in every square inch of that field with one push of the button.
And how many crew on the gunship?
4, again. Aircraft commander, a co-pilot, a door gunner, and a crew chief. The co-pilot was firing the Gatling gun. The aircraft commander was flying the rockets. And just a little aside, if you see Hueys, you'll see on their inside of the plexiglass windows, you'll see these little red marks in them. They're grease pencil marks. And that's the way they aimed and fired the rockets. They'd fire a practice rocket and watch it, and then they would take a grease pencil and mark it. And then that's how they would actually fire all the rest of the rockets.
How accurate was that?
Incredibly accurate.
Incredibly.
Yes. I've seen those guys fire the rockets and go right into a bunker. The gunships would continue to circle the ground troops. And if they ran into trouble, the gunships would then go right in with them and fire on the enemy. I flew with the gunships for 2 months.
And you were the pilot now?
I was always a co-pilot. I was never an aircraft commander in the gun. And then my commanding officer ultimately wanted me to fly command and control. There was a single aircraft loaded with all kinds of fancy radios and stuff. And they wanted somebody that really knew how to go about doing this, because a lot of times the ground guys, they would ask the aircraft commander of CNC, well, what do you think? You did all this for the last almost a year, and how should we do this?
Yeah.
And so I did enjoy being flying CNC, but it was very nerve-wracking because If you make a mistake, then you got a general mad at you. That was never
Okay,
good.
you spent 2 years in Vietnam.
Yes, 2 years.
Was this the first year?
Yeah, this was the first year I was with the 240th Assault Helicopter.
Then you came back home.
I came back home. I went to Colorado Springs. I left Vietnam in July of 1970. And in Colorado Springs, I joined the 283rd Assault Helicopter Company. They were training the 10th Mountain Division on how to do high altitude combat assaults in Russia. In other words, the 10th Mountain Division had not been trained. They never sent them to Vietnam, of course. They were primarily in Germany, right? But they wanted them to be able to get in helicopters and do these combat assaults, but in Eastern Europe. It was a very strange experience because here I was, 100 degrees, 100% humidity, and 2 weeks later I'm in Colorado Springs and it's minus 10 degrees and we're at very high altitude, and it was quite a difficult task. This was in 1971, 1972, and things with Soviet Union were pretty tense then. So if they'd sent the 10th Mountain Division to Germany, I would have had to gone with them. But it turned out that I didn't have to do that.
Dan, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for your service,
Okay,
sir.
thank you.
It's a pleasure talking with you.
Nice talking to you.